Lisa Thompson had always been the kind of woman who wore a warm smile no matter how hard life got. After her husband walked out on her and their daughter Mia when Mia was just 3 years old, Lisa never let herself fall apart. She worked double shifts at a local diner, helped Mia with schoolwork every night, and never once showed the weight she carried on her shoulders. For 6 years, it was just the two of them, mother and daughter, together against the world. Then one day, a man named Paul Bennett walked into the diner. He was quiet, polite, and always tipped well. Paul had just moved into town from another state, trying to start fresh after what he said was a messy divorce. He didn't talk much about his past, but Lisa didn't ask. He came in every Thursday afternoon, always ordered the same thing, and always smiled when Lisa brought him his coffee. Over time, small conversations turned into longer ones. Before she realized it, Lisa had started looking forward to Thursdays. Within a few months, Paul and Lisa started seeing each other outside of work. He seemed gentle, kind, and attentive, everything her first husband wasn't. He fixed things around her house, brought groceries without being asked, and even started helping Mia with her school projects. At first, Mia was shy around him. She'd hide behind her mother's leg and stare at him with suspicious eyes. Paul would laugh it off and try to win her over with little gifts, puzzles, art supplies, a pink backpack with stars on it. Eventually, Lisa believed she had found someone who could make their little family whole again. After almost a year of dating, they got married in a small ceremony at the local courthouse. Lisa looked happier than she had in years. The picture showed a glowing bride, a proud stepfather, and a smiling little girl in a white dress. Everyone in town congratulated her, saying she deserved this happiness. Nobody saw any red flags. Paul never raised his voice, never lost his temper in public, and always appeared calm. They moved into a modest 2-bedroom house on the edge of town. Lisa kept her job at the diner, and Paul started working at a nearby hardware store. Life seemed steady and predictable. Neighbors saw them walking hand in hand down the street, attending church together, and hosting small BBQs on weekends. Paul gained the community's trust quickly. He came across as responsible and respectful, even a bit reserved. No one would have guessed there was anything wrong, but there was one person who never completely relaxed: Mia. She had never called Paul Dad, and even after the wedding, she kept a small photo of her real father hidden in a drawer. She watched Paul closely, noticed the way his eyes sometimes followed her mother when she wasn't looking, how he would clench his jaw when he thought no one saw. Lisa believed her daughter just needed more time to adjust. She told herself this was normal. Change was hard for children. What Lisa didn't know was that the man she had let into their lives was hiding far more than just a messy divorce. Life inside the Thompson home began to shift, slowly at first, so slowly that no one noticed. Lisa, once bright and full of energy, started changing in small but undeniable ways. She became quieter, more withdrawn. She no longer stayed after work to chat with friends or accept dinner invites from neighbors. Her phone calls became brief, and she stopped posting cheerful photos of Mia on social media. At the diner, she worked with her head down, avoiding eye contact, always glancing at the clock. Her co-workers assumed she was just tired. Being a mom, wife, and full-time employee could wear anyone down, but there were signs that something more serious was going on. Lisa began showing up to work with small bruises on her arms and legs. When asked, she brushed them off with a laugh, blaming clumsiness or kitchen accidents. Once, a friend spotted a deep scratch on her neck. Lisa quickly pulled up her collar and said it was from the cat. But Lisa didn't own a cat. The explanations never quite made sense, but nobody pressed further. Most assumed Lisa just valued her privacy. Mia, too, had changed. Her once bubbly personality had faded. She was quieter in school, no longer interested in drawing or participating in class. Her teachers noticed she stared out of the window often, her eyes distant. During one parent-teacher meeting, they mentioned these changes to Lisa, who seemed genuinely concerned but distracted. She promised to look into it but never followed up. At home, Mia spent most of her time in her room. She didn't talk much at dinner. She avoided eye contact with Paul entirely. The house that once felt warm and filled with laughter had grown cold. Lisa stopped inviting people over. Even during the holidays, she kept the celebrations small. One neighbor remembered knocking on Lisa's door to drop off cookies. Paul opened it just a crack, thanked her curtly, and shut it without inviting her in. Something felt off, but again, no one had any proof. On the outside, everything looked fine. Bills were paid. The lawn was trimmed. Lisa and Paul still appeared together at church every now and then. Privately, Lisa was beginning to feel trapped. Paul had started controlling small aspects of her life, her clothing, who she spoke to, how long she stayed out. If she was late getting home, he questioned her. If she received a call, he wanted to know who it was. He started checking her phone and deleting contacts. Lisa didn't argue. She stayed quiet, hoping to keep the peace. But peace never came. His moods were unpredictable. One moment he was calm and affectionate. The next, he would glare at her with silent anger, as if punishing her for something she didn't understand. Mia noticed everything. She saw the way Paul stared at her mother. She heard the late-night arguments behind closed doors. She heard things breaking. She listened to her mother cry softly when she thought Mia was asleep. Mia didn't know how to help, so she stayed silent. She carried the weight of fear in her small body, waiting for the moment it would all explode. The rain had started early that Sunday morning and never stopped. Gray clouds covered the sky, and the steady sound of droplets tapping against the windows created a heavy, quiet tension inside the house. Lisa moved through the kitchen carefully, as if trying not to disturb something fragile. She chopped vegetables for dinner, her hands slightly trembling. Her face looked pale, her eyes sunken with worry. Mia sat curled up on the living room couch, wrapped in a blanket, clutching her stuffed bear. The TV was on, playing a cartoon, but her eyes were fixed elsewhere. She wasn't watching. She was waiting. Paul had been drinking since noon. He sat at the kitchen table, nursing a bottle of whiskey, staring into nothing. His shirt was wrinkled, his hair uncombed. The light above him flickered slightly, casting eerie shadows across the room. He hadn't said much all day, but his silence wasn't peaceful. It was heavy, brooding. Lisa kept her distance, glancing at him every few seconds, as if trying to predict his next move. The air was thick with something unspoken. Earlier that week, Paul had found an email on Lisa's phone. It was a message to a women's shelter, asking for advice. She hadn't planned on sending it so soon, but something inside her had broken. She had written about Paul's behavior, the fear, the bruises, and how she didn't want her daughter to grow up in a house like this. Paul hadn't confronted her immediately. He had waited, let it build, let it fester. Now, the storm inside him was ready to break. He stood up suddenly, the chair screeching across the floor. Lisa froze. Paul walked toward the sink, filled a glass with water, and then stood there, staring out the rain-covered window. His grip tightened around the glass. Lisa continued chopping, pretending not to notice, pretending everything was fine. But her body was tense, her shoulders tight. She knew something was coming. She just didn't know when. Paul turned around slowly and looked at her. His eyes weren't filled with rage. They were blank, cold, almost lifeless. Without saying a word, he stepped toward the drawer, pulled it open, and grabbed a long kitchen knife. Lisa backed away, confused and terrified. Paul didn't raise his voice, didn't scream. He just moved forward and lunged. What followed was a storm of violence. Lisa tried to run, but he was faster. He pinned her against the counter and began stabbing, over and over. The knife moved with horrifying speed, and blood splattered across the floor, the walls, even onto the ceiling light. Lisa screamed once, just once, before her voice was silenced. Her body collapsed to the floor, twitching, and then stopped moving. Mia sat completely still. She hadn't moved from the couch. Her eyes were wide, her face pale. She gripped her bear tightly, her tiny fingers shaking. She had seen everything, every terrifying second. But she made no sound, no scream, no cry. Her body wouldn't let her. She was frozen in place, a silent witness to her mother's final moments. And Paul? He stood over Lisa's body, breathing heavily, blood covering his hands, chest rising and falling. Then he dropped the knife, turned around, and walked out the front door, leaving it wide open as the rain continued to fall. The call came in just after midnight. A neighbor walking their dog had noticed the front door of Lisa Thompson's house swinging open, the light still on inside despite the late hour. When the neighbor called out and received no answer, he stepped cautiously onto the porch. What he saw inside made him stumble backward in shock. Blood was smeared across the kitchen floor, and Lisa's body lay motionless, sprawled beside a broken chair. The police were immediately dispatched, and within minutes, flashing lights painted the street in red and blue. Officers entered with caution, unsure of what they were walking into. They found Lisa's lifeless body first, her face pale, eyes wide open, frozen in the horror of her final moments. Blood had soaked through her clothes and pooled beneath her. Her wounds were deep and numerous, more than a dozen stab marks across her chest and abdomen. It was clear she hadn't stood a chance, but it was the next discovery that shook even the most experienced investigators. In the living room, wrapped in a blanket and still clutching a blood-splattered stuffed bear, sat Mia. She didn't flinch when the officers entered. She didn't speak. She didn't cry. Her eyes were empty, her small body still as stone. It was as if her mind had shut down to protect her from what she had witnessed. One of the officers gently reached for her, but she didn't respond. She simply stared ahead, trapped in silence. An ambulance was called for Mia, not for physical wounds, but for the emotional trauma she clearly carried. She was taken to the hospital for evaluation while investigators began to piece together the grisly crime scene. The murder weapon, a large kitchen knife, was found near Lisa's body. It was covered in blood, fingerprints clearly visible. Nothing had been taken. There was no sign of a robbery or break-in. This was no random act of violence. It was personal. The search for Paul Bennett began immediately. His car was missing, and his phone had been turned off. His co-workers were questioned, but no one had heard from him in over a day. His background was re-examined, and that's when the truth began to unravel. Though Paul's record had appeared clean when he moved to town, deeper digging revealed sealed court documents from another state. Documents detailing a history of domestic abuse, restraining orders, and a former partner who had gone missing under suspicious circumstances. Lisa had never known any of this. The town was in shock. How could a man who seemed so calm, so helpful, be capable of such brutality? Friends who had once praised him now struggled to reconcile the image of the polite handyman with the killer who had taken Lisa's life. Meanwhile, Mia was placed under the care of Child Protection Services. She remained quiet, her trauma too fresh for words. Her drawings, once colorful and bright, turned into pages filled with red scribbles and dark shadows, and Paul was still out there. Somewhere. 2 days after the murder, police received a tip from a gas station clerk just outside the county line. A man matching Paul Bennett's description had been spotted buying food and water, looking disheveled and nervous. Surveillance footage confirmed it was him. He was wearing the same clothes from the night of the murder, stained and torn, and appeared to be traveling alone. This sparked an immediate manhunt across the surrounding rural areas. Helicopters circled overhead while K-9 units searched abandoned barns and wooded paths. Locals were told to stay indoors and report any suspicious activity. It was in an abandoned trailer deep in the woods, nearly 20 miles from Lisa's home, where officers finally found him. Paul had barricaded himself inside with a few canned goods and a flashlight. When police surrounded the trailer, he didn't resist. He walked out slowly, his hands raised, face blank. He offered no explanation, no apology. During the interrogation, he answered questions in a monotone voice, revealing only one chilling reason for what he did. Lisa was planning to leave him. Paul said it calmly, as if that justified everything. In his mind, Lisa's decision to seek help had been a betrayal, and betrayal had consequences. He had seen the email. He knew she was making plans to escape. Rather than lose control over her, he decided she couldn't leave at all. His cold, emotionless confession shocked investigators. There was no remorse, no grief, just entitlement. Back in town, the community was still struggling to come to terms with what had happened. Lisa was laid to rest in a small ceremony, attended by close friends and family. Mia, still too fragile to attend, stayed with her maternal grandparents. Counselors worked with her daily, but the trauma ran deep. She rarely spoke, only offering small nods or brief glances. She suffered from nightmares and panic attacks. The once bright little girl who loved drawing stars and animals now scribbled only dark, chaotic shapes. Her innocence had been stolen in a matter of minutes. At trial, Paul Bennett showed no emotion. Prosecutors presented the evidence, his fingerprints on the knife, the sealed abuse records, and the terrifying drawings Mia had created in the weeks leading up to the murder. A psychologist testified that Paul displayed classic signs of narcissistic rage and control-driven violence. The jury deliberated for less than 3 hours before finding him guilty of first-degree murder. The judge sentenced him to life in prison, without the possibility of parole. Though justice was served, it did little to erase the pain left behind. Lisa's friends often wondered if there was something more they could have done, some sign they missed, some moment where they could have stepped in. Mia continued her therapy, slowly rebuilding her sense of safety in a world that had shown her its darkest side far too early. Lisa Thompson's story became a haunting reminder that abuse can hide behind the most normal smiles, and that sometimes the most dangerous monsters don't lurk in the shadows. They live right inside our homes,